Has returned from closed session. May our city attorney please report out for us?
Mayor, I'd be happy to do that. The City Council had two items on the closed session. One item was an item of anticipated litigation. We received a briefing on that matter from the city attorney and the city manager. There was no reportable action. The other item was a conference with their lead labor negotiator, who is the city manager in this case. He presented a status update on negotiations with the Temple City Employees Association, unrepresented general and part-time employees. Received direction from the council, but there was no other reportable action on that item. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So we are now adjourned from our closed session, and we'll take a 5-minute break before we start our regular meeting. So we'll return at 7:38. Thank you. I'd like to call the regular City Council meeting of July 3rd, 2018 to order. Madam Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Yes. Councilmember Chavez?
Here.
Councilmember Sternquist? Here. Councilmember Yu?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Fish? Here. Mayor Mann?
Here. And so at the beginning, we are pleased to have the invocation, which will be provided by Reverend Eli El-Bayadi, who is also the chaplain from the Temple Sheriff Station. Welcome, Reverend. Please all rise for the invocation.
I'm happy to be here before the 4th of July. I want to wish everybody, all the Americans, happy 4th of July. And we need to pray for our country. Amen. I am from Egypt originally, but this is my country now. We need to pray for America all the time. God bless America. Amen. Heavenly Father, we are coming in your name right this moment. We thank you for this wonderful city, Temple City. I pray, Lord, for everybody working in this Temple City, from the mayor to everybody in his cabinets. Lord Jesus, please bless our country. Put your hands upon California. Lord Jesus, we pray especially for Temple City. Let all our decisions to be made by you, Lord. You make it. Bless all our decisions to be from you, Lord. Lord Jesus, put your hands upon our city and bless it. Bless every work. Bless every project. Bless every shop. Bless everybody, every home in the city. Let us cry to you, Lord, seeking your face, asking you to interfere in all our situations. Open the doors for those who are seeking jobs, Lord. Those who want to get healed, we pray for them to touch them and to heal them. Because you are our great healer. All the needs of our cities, Lord, we put it in front of you. And we trust you because you are our great daddy. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend. Thank you. We could please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Today we have the pleasure of having Girl Scout Troop 5141.
Color guard, attention. Color guard, forward march. Color guard, up. Color guard, across the colors. Color guard, up. Color guard, post your colors. All those in uniform, please salute. If not, place your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Color guard, retreat. Color guard, halt. Color guard, dismiss. Thank you.
Thank you, Girl Scout Troop 5141. Next, we have, well, unfortunately, we don't have the Pet of the Month. That will be moved to our August 7th meeting, so we won't be having that today. Next, for on ceremonial matters, we do have the adoption of resolutions confirming appointments to the Parks and Recreation Commission, Planning Commission, and the Transportation and Public Safety Commission. Madam City Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. The City Council established a City Commissioner Recruitment Ad Hoc Committee in April, and applications are due in May, and the ad hoc committee had an opportunity to interview applicants in May and made a recommendation to council. And tonight, we're asking the council to adopt 3 resolutions appointing city commissioners to serve on the 3 city commissions with term of office from July 1st, 2018, and ending June 30th of 2020. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess, do we need a motion to adopt the resolutions? Or-
Make a motion to approve?
Sure. Okay,
Second.
okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, could we have the roll call, please?
All three.
All 3 resolutions that are listed.
First, second, and third.
Thank
Or
you.
1, 2, and 3.
Councilmember Chavez?
Yes.
Councilmember Sternquist?
Yes.
Councilmember Yu?
Happy, yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Fish?
Yes.
Mayor Mann?
Yes. So congratulations to all of our commissioners for being reappointed. And I think at this point, we'd like to invite them all up to take the oath of office administered by our city clerk. Please come on up.
Do it all at the same time.
Yay. Hi, Krista. How are you? Hi. Mr. O'Leary. What's Mr. O'Leary doing here? Hi, Tom.
Since all of our commissioners are dressed so nice today, why don't we all go up and let's get a picture with them. And we also have certificates for you, so I almost forgot that. And so for everyone in the audience who may or may not know their names, our Parks and Rec Commissioner, Donna Giorgino and Crystal Haddad, and our Transportation and Safety Commissioners, Noel Palmieri and Osama Nimri, and our 2 Planning Commissioners, Serge Haddad and Tom O'Leary. I just want to say that we are very blessed to have so many capable and great commissioners who are willing to dedicate their time to serve our city. So we are very grateful for your service. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
And so moving on to item 6, public comments on items not listed on the agenda. I do have one speaker request from Lynn Best.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. For those of you that may not know me, my name is Lynn Best. I'm currently the president of the Temple City Historical Society. And I have given each one of you folks sitting here in the horseshoe the flyer for an upcoming event that means an awfully lot to the Historical Society. This year would actually be the 95th year of the actual founding of this town by Mr. Walter Temple himself. He bought the first 400 acres in 1923, and I have a picture that hangs in the museum that shows an aerial shot of the main intersection at Main and Sunset. In 1924, they were celebrating the first anniversary. I am building on that so that we will start with the 95th celebration at our Americana dinner in September. And the plan is to ask the city's involvement over the next 5 years, because we will be reaching a 100-year milestone. I think it's about time that the Historical Society was able to step up and bring this to people's attention. It's only been in the last 3.5 years that this became a passion of mine, to work in the city, to work with this museum and the society. And through that work, I have learned an awful lot about the history and the founding of this town. And even though I wasn't born here, I've lived here off and on since 1955, which is about 80% of my life. So I give you the flyers. I will be giving you the other flyer in the next few weeks that will have a ticket order form. And we would strongly encourage you to come to that event that evening. It should be very, very interesting. It should be a lot of fun. You will see that we have a gentleman by the name of John Waltrip who is going to provide music for the evening. And he has been connected with the Waltrip Music Firm over in Alhambra for many years, and in West Arcadia as well. So we are very grateful for that participation. So I will leave some of these flyers at the back. Please take one. I've already given them out to some of the people around here that I know. And I've been trying nicely to twist a few, so. Anyway, thank you very much. Appreciate the time. And I hope to see you all at the dinner. Otherwise, I expect to see you at the park, and come by and buy a piece of candy. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Lynn. All right, so is there anyone else from the public that'd like to address the council at this moment? Steve, are you okay? Oh, he's not. Okay.
Okay.
All right, then I will close public comment, and we'll move on to consent calendar. At this time, does anyone want to remove any items from the consent calendar, or may I have a motion for the consent calendar?
I'll motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. May we have the roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Chavez?
Yes.
Councilmember Sternquist?
Yes.
Councilmember Yu?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Fish?
Yes.
Mayor Mann?
Yes. So the consent calendar has been approved. Moving on to item 8A, we have an appeal of the Planning Commission's decision that denied a request to convert an unpermitted structure into an accessory dwelling unit located at 5813 Maida Avenue. So I'd like to ask our city manager, Mr. Cook, to provide a brief overview before we get into it.
Sure. This item is brought to you, Mayor Mann, and the council after the due process of allowing the applicant to appeal it through the Community Development Director's hearing, Planning Commission, and before you tonight. The facts are laid out for you. and I will allow if we allow Mr. Reimers to provide a little bit of more broad overview, and then the planner in charge, Mr. Glick, will go through some of the details of that. This is a public hearing. The applicant is in the audience, and your discretion on how to structure that. So we'll wait for your the discussion on how you want to structure his presentation. But staff will provide about a 10-15-minute presentation, allow you to afterwards council to ask any questions, and the applicant can give a presentation. Council will go back and forth, and we'll open up the public hearing and go through the deliberative process here.
Okay, sure, yeah, but before we turn it over to Mr. Reimers, I would say sort of what you described. Let's go through staff's presentation first, and finish any questions we may have on that, and then we'll bring up the appellant. Our understanding is he also has a presentation.
Is our understanding as well.
Right, and then at that time we'll clarify a little bit more in terms of the time allowed, and we'll play by ear. We'll go one by one. So, turning it back to you,
Mr. Reimers.
Great. Good evening, Council. Tonight, I just want to begin by putting this case in some perspective. Since the state passed its ADU law in January of 2017, or since it's become effective, the Planning Division has taken in 793 cases total. Of that, 75 cases are ADU cases. Of those 75, 43 have been approved, and the rest have either been withdrawn or remain in the process. So what you're seeing tonight is a very rare case. It's very unique. And when we go through the presentation, what we focus the presentation is on three questions that really lie at the heart of this matter. And that first question is, was the application complete? The reason why that question is important is because the answer to that question tells us which code or which law should be followed. If the application was complete before the effective date of the ordinance, then we would use the state ADU law. If it was not complete at the effective date, then we would use the code that was adopted by the City Council. The appellant is stating that he believes that the application was complete. We do not agree with him. But even if the council were to grant him the fact that it was complete, to approve this project, the council would need to find affirmatively the answer to these two questions, and that is the structure a garage, and is the structure existing? So in order to approve the project, we would need to affirmatively say yes to those two questions. The appellant believes that this structure is a garage, that it's existing, and therefore believes that it can be approved. Your staff, the planning staff, does not agree with those contentions. So.
Thank you, Mr. Reimers. Good evening, Mayor, council members, and members of the audience. Tonight I'll be going over a summary of the application and then some of the questions that staff has analyzed. So the applicant submitted an application for a planning application to convert an existing structure into an accessory dwelling unit. The owner appealed the project, citing that staff's denial was misinterpreted the state ADU law. Staff denied the application because the accessory structure is not a garage, which is stated in the state law, and I'll show you that later. The accessory structure is not existing because it is unpermitted. We consider that new construction, and the accessory structure does not comply with city or state development standards. So a brief overview of kind of the chain of events that have occurred. So on January 1st is when the state ADU, 2017 is when the state ADU law went into effect. It wasn't until July 5th when the City Council adopted the ordinance. 30 days after that, the ordinance goes into effect. The applicant submitted the application prior to the city's ordinance going into effect on July 24th. Staff sent a comment letter to the property owner on August 9th. There were a series of emails that went back and forth between staff and the property owner. And November 27th, staff sent a second letter indicating that the application remained incomplete at that time. And ultimately, staff ended up sending a denial letter on January 19th, 2018. After that, shortly after that, the applicant or the property owner filed an appeal of the Community Development Director's decision, which goes to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission heard the item on April 10th, and the Planning Commission unanimously denied the appeal. It was a 3-0 vote. There were 2 planning commissioners that were absent that night. On April 20th, the applicant filed an appeal of the Planning Commission's decision. That's why the item is before you tonight. On June 25th, the applicant did provide some materials, and it's our understanding that they have provided some additional materials after the staff report was sent to the council members and published on the city's website. Just kind of a brief background about the property itself. The lot's 50 by 155. It's R1 single-family residential. The property has an existing single-story house in the front with a 2-car garage located in the rear with an attached unpermitted storage room. So as part of the analysis, we looked at kind of the 2 questions: which code should be applied, the state code or the city's newly adopted ADU code, and also depends on whether the application was deemed complete. The second question is, does the project meet the code? So staff needs to review the applications and decide whether or not they can approve it based on what the code allows, or give the applicant options or deny the project if it doesn't comply with the code. So staff did provide the applicant with some options for moving forward with their project. We sought information from the applicant on how he wished to proceed. The applicant believes that the application was complete and the state ADU law should be applied. Staff and the Planning Commission determined that the project was incomplete. Therefore, the ADU code should be applied, the city's ADU regulations. The project was incomplete because the accessory structure, the storage room, was unpermitted, and the plans did not comply with the state ADU or the city's standards.
Adam, excuse me. Are you going to cover in what information you provide the applicant options?
We did provide, I think there was a series of emails that went back and forth with the applicant on options that they had.
But can you mind summarizing what those options are? Or would you be covering that in other slides?
I think initially we told them that the structure could either try to be legalized or get a permit to comply with the current regulations as a storage room. If there is existing plumbing in the structure, right, that requires a conditional use permit, which would go to the Planning Commission, or they could demolish the structure because in the city's eyes there was no permit for it.
I see. Okay, thank you.
So the applicant did not respond to the city staff's request when we requested for additional information. So the project remained incomplete. So ultimately, staff ended up denying the project. So this is a screenshot of what the state code says, one of the sections. So staff looked at the project and determined that the project did not meet the state ADU code. And it states in there in the first part of that paragraph that no setback shall be required for an existing garage. The storage room, staff determined the storage room was not eligible because it is not a garage and it is not existing. There were no permits for it. There's no language in the state ADU law that talks about unpermitted structures being allowed to keep an existing setback. In staff's experience, as used in zoning and building codes, an existing structure refers to a structure that was legally constructed with city approvals and building permits. The applicant did provide information of a definition of what existing structure should be, and that's from actually the Housing and Community Development Commission, the AD, or Housing and Community Development Department, sorry. ADU memo they prepared for cities to use, and that memo was a sample ordinance for cities to consider using as kind of a guiding their own, developing their own ADU regulations. This memo was not a part of the state law, and nor was it an interpretation of the state law. Legislature did not direct HCD to prepare this to interpret the ADU law. So in conclusion, the state ADU law is very clear that the only existing structures are eligible to retain existing setbacks, and staff.
Existing structures or existing garages?
Oh, existing garages, sorry. The only existing garages are eligible to retain existing setbacks. Staff denied the application based on the accessory structure is not a garage. The accessory structure is not existing because it is unpermitted. And the accessory structure does not comply with the city or state ADU development standards. And with that, staff recommends that you adopt the attached resolution upholding the community development director's determination to deny the project because it does not comply with state law or meet the city's development standards. And that completes my presentation.
Okay, thank you. At this point, I'd like to see if council has any questions. Maybe starting with
I
Councilmember
have a quick one. What I was asking about the options offered to the applicants was one of the options that perhaps is let's set aside accessory the accessory storage room for a minute, which is the unpermitted or illegal, if you will. Did we advise them they could have taken the existing garage which was permitted and turned that into ADU? Would have been acceptable, right?
We did not offer that option. We sent a letter, a comment letter, asking for direction from the applicant about how he would like to proceed, given that there were code issues that were outstanding. At that point, we never received any response in which we could have had that conversation about what other additional, more creative options would be available.
Okay, thanks.
And also, just because it's kind of related to your question, the understanding is that the applicant was proposing to only convert the unpermitted portion to ADU, not the garage plus the unpermitted portion, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So, is there other questions from council?
From August 9th, 2017 until you heard from the applicant, I believe on, when was it? December 8th, 2017. Were there any email exchanges, anything between the city and the applicant? I'm led to believe that there was none.
It says November 27th.
Yeah.
There was something sent to.
Well,
yeah.
no, I know, but from August 9th until December 8th, did we receive anything from the applicant? Any response to the August 9th letter?
There were several email exchanges back and forth between several staff members and the applicant, and it was not alternative. It was more whether or not his project should have been deemed complete, and also that his existing structure is eligible to be converted into an ADU.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from council? Mayor Pro Tem? No? So I guess just one clarifying question for staff. So it's our understanding that at no point did the applicant request that the existing garage be part of the application?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. No.
I do have a question.
Sure.
Does the garage and the, whatever it's called, storage unit, does it share a wall? Is it one building or is it two separate buildings? It looks like it's one building from the picture.
I believe it's one building. This is a look at the floor plan that they provided.
So there's, but it does share that one wall.
Yeah, so it's one building with one roof. There's a shared wall between, there's one wall between the storage structure on the left and the garage on the right.
Would you be able to tell if it was built at the same time?
We know it was not built at the same time. We have
Okay.
records from the county that demonstrate that the garage was built at the same time as the house.
Okay.
And at that point, the building description blank, which comes from the county assessor's office, did not show a storage structure at that time.
Okay,
And then we do not have any permit record that occurred any time after that.
correct. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So at this point, I'd like to open the public hearing and call for a presentation by the appellant, Mr. Rick Kuo. And I believe, City Clerk, do we also have a PowerPoint presentation? Yes, and just before you begin, I just want to let you know that we're going to give you 15 minutes to give your presentation. You don't have to take up the entire 15 minutes. And I'd also like to ask council to maybe hold your questions to the end of Mr. Kuo's presentation so he gets a chance to go through all of his information. And if there are questions for him, then we can ask afterwards, independent of the time that we're giving you to present. Okay?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Rick Kuo. When we bought our house back in 2011, we were aware that the accessory structure was unpermitted, but we wanted to make it right. So when the state ADU law was passed in 2017, we put in an application to turn it into an ADU. We live in a small two-bedroom house and thought that the ADU would give my elderly father a space of his own and our two kids more room in the house. But before I get into my presentation, I just want to clarify a statement that Mr. Weimer just made. He said that I claimed that my accessory structure was a garage. I never said that, so I don't know where that came from, and I think those kind of misstatements are not helpful at all. So I want to start off with the state ADU law. So section 65852.2A1 of the Government Code reads, a local agency may, by ordinance, provide for the creation of accessory dwelling units in single-family and multi-family residential zones. The ordinance shall do all of the following. Impose standards on accessory dwelling units that include but are not limited to parking height, setback, and so forth. Require the accessory dwelling units to...
What is the set forth? Is there something missing?
Well,
there
it just
that is
are
relevant?
more, standards that
You
are...
given as part of the section, though, correct?
Yeah, I just read just the portion that I thought was
Okay.
pertinent to my
Thank you.
case. So require the accessory dwelling units to comply with all of the following. No setback shall be required for an existing garage that is converted to an accessory dwelling unit. To sum up what I just read, the state ADU law permits local agencies to impose those standards on ADUs. These standards include the no setback required for an existing garage that staff had cited. But these standards must be implemented through an ADU ordinance, otherwise only state standards could be applied. During my application submittal, Mr. Adam Golick stated that my accessory structure could not be converted into an ADU because it was in a garage. I told Mr. Golick that this standard for no setback for an existing garage could not be used because the city did not have an ADU ordinance in effect at the time to enforce this standard. In the end, my application was denied for the following two reasons. One, that my application was not deemed complete. Two, that my accessory structure was not an existing garage and not eligible for an ADU and needed a 10-foot rear yard setback. I want to address the first reason for denial. First of all, the city zoning code does not define or even mention what deemed complete is. That raises the question. How does the city deem a new application or new applications if it doesn't define what deemed complete is? Common sense would tell us that when you deem an application for completeness, you have to base it on the application. That's why it's called application deemed complete. Without an adequate answer from staff, I inquired with Mr. Andrew Coyne, and this is what he said in an email to me. In answer to your question, deemed complete means that you have submitted all of the required materials, application, architectural plans, forms, etc., and the information provided on the plans is complete. I submitted my application on July 24, 2017. Mr. Golick took it in and did not indicate that anything was missing from my application or plans. Given this and that the city did not have criteria for deeming an application, it would be logical to conclude that my application was technically deemed complete the day it was accepted. However, staff still deemed my application incomplete, not because he thought that anything was missing from my application and plans, but because he said that my accessory structure was not eligible for an ADU. That was wrong. That contradicted not only what Mr. Andrew Coyne had said about deemed complete, but also what we all know that you can't deem an application incomplete without looking at the application itself. I want to ask your city council, why wouldn't my application be considered deemed complete when all required materials and plan information were submitted? I want to add that if my application and plans were missing required materials and information, I would have no doubt that staff would have deemed it incomplete based on the application itself. Staff's second reason for denying my application was that my accessory structure was not an existing garage and not eligible for an ADU and needed a 10-foot rear yard setback. The basis of staff's argument is based on the no setback required for an existing garage. In my brief overview of the state ADU law, I showed that a local agency such as Temple City could impose this setback through an ADU ordinance. However, the city did not have an ADU ordinance in effect at the time of my application submittal. So staff had no legal basis to use setback as a reason to deny my application. Okay, getting back to staff's second reason for denial, I want to refute the notion that my accessory structure is not eligible because it is unpermitted. An unpermitted structure that can meet current development standards is more eligible than a new proposed structure that cannot meet current development standards. So it's not about the permitting status of a structure, but all about whether that structure can meet development standards.
And
Furthermore,
what do you base that on? Are you quoting some law right now? Or
no, I'm not. Because
I'm
sorry?
Is that just your opinion or your interpretation of the law?
No, because people legalize structures all the time, and I'm not advocating unpermitted structures.
What people legalize structures all the time? What are you talking about?
Well, I think that's part of the planning practice. People have unpermitted structures, and they try to comply with the current standards so that they can legalize it.
Yeah, Councilmember Chavez, maybe I'll ask that we hold that question to the end.
Sometimes I don't remember my questions. I guess I should start writing it down. It's fresher in my mind.
Furthermore, the standard for no setback shall be required for an existing garage is vague, and it can mean anything or nothing as far as non-garages are concerned. It can mean that because setback is not required for an existing garage, then a 6-foot setback is required for non-garages, such as my accessory structure. I can make a case for my existing 6-foot side and 6-foot rear yard setback because the state ADU law is silent on setback. Other than to say that setback can be regulated in an ADU ordinance, staff had indicated that a 0 setback would be permitted if my application was deemed complete before the effective date of the city's ADU ordinance. And I have demonstrated that my application should have been deemed complete because staff did not seek out any missing materials from my application and plans. Now, this is not the same as staff seeking revised plans because what staff sought out did not pertain to missing application and plans. So staff incorrectly deemed my application incomplete. Before the city's ADU ordinance became effective on August 4, 2017, staff approved a conversion of another accessory structure to an ADU on Loma Avenue with a 5.5-foot rear yard setback. If staff had applied the same standard or requirements to this accessory structure as staff did to mine, then this accessory structure would not have been approved as an ADU. It did not have the required 10-foot rear yard setback, and it clearly was not an existing garage. Now, I understand that the city's ADU ordinance allows permitted structure to be converted into ADUs with existing setbacks. However, this accessory structure was not, or it was approved before the effective date of the city's ADU ordinance, so it could not have benefited from the city's ADU ordinance. As a result, this accessory structure would have to comply with the no setback required for an existing garage, but it could not for reasons I have stated. So this is the approved ADU on 6213 Loma Avenue. So this structure did not have the required 10-foot rear yard setback, was not an existing garage, could not have benefited from the city's ADU ordinance, did not comply with the no setbacks shall be required for an existing garage. However, it was deemed complete and then approved on June 1st, 2017. So how was this ADU approved? Well, staff knew that the no setback required for an existing garage standard was not a state standard at all. This standard could not be used to deny this ADU, and that's why this ADU was passed or it was approved, because staff had, could not apply this no setback for existing garage. Staff's case for denying my application was based on the no setback for an existing garage, which I explained does not say anything about required setback for non-garages. That's not to say that the city can't regulate setback for non-garages. It can, but it must be done through an ADU ordinance, and that is why your city council adopted the ADU ordinance with the 10-foot rear yard setback for non-garages. On the other hand, my application was submitted before the effective date of the city's ADU ordinance. Staff did not find that anything was missing from my application and plans. Therefore, my application should have been deemed complete and reviewed according to state standards. State standards do not address specific setback other than to say that it can be regulated in an adopted ADU ordinance. As a result, my application should have been approved with a 6-foot rear yard setback. From the beginning, I asked that my application be treated fairly according to the law. I understand that there are some local agencies that do not favor the state ADU law, but it is the law and we have to respect it. As a homeowner, I do have the right to legalize my accessory structure for a by right use that can meet development standards. The state ADU law and the city's zoning code do not contain language that takes this right away from anyone. The goal of the state ADU law is not to discourage housing, but to encourage it and to help families such as mine that need housing for elderly parents. I want to conclude my presentation with the following questions that I hope your city council will address. What is the definition of deemed complete pertaining to my application? Why wouldn't my application be deemed complete when all application materials and plan information were submitted? And how could staff justify denying my application while approving another one on Loma Avenue that didn't have a 10-foot setback and that was not an existing garage? That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Kuo. Before we get into specific council questions, I'd maybe like to just ask staff to clarify 2 items. One is regarding the appellant's question about the ADU at Loma Avenue. Is it correct that the accessory structure in question at that address was a permitted and existing carport / garage?
Yes, the application on Loma is different than the application that's before you tonight in that the structure is existing. It had a permit. We have the permit on file for that site. So when they came in to apply to convert it, we could demonstrate that it was existing at the time. That application included the conversion of that structure from a garage and carport to an ADU. And furthermore, that application was not only submitted, it was also approved prior to the date of the effective ordinance of the city's ADU code. So in those three questions that we brought to you tonight, this application is different.
Okay, thank you. And let's see, I had a second issue. Okay, well, I think I wanted to maybe clear that one up because I think there were conflicting informations going back and forth. So, okay, well, I guess going to perhaps council questions for the appellant. Maybe council member, do you have any questions you'd like to start off with?
For the applicant?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Kuo, I think staff's report mentioned several times that options were provided and emails were sent, and I believe staff's report said that you have chosen not to respond to them. Is that correct?
Well, I guess during the last year, there was a lot of back and forth with Mr. Reimers, and the reason why I did not, well, I mean, we were never out of touch, but the reason why I did not submit revised plans was because I felt strongly about my case, and I felt that my application was complete, and by submitting revised plans, I would just be, giving up, just saying that, okay, you're right, I'm wrong. I mean, it's not about right or wrong, but it's just whether I feel like I have a case for my ADU.
Was there any, did you come to counter, work with staff? Because I believe on staff typically
Well,
will work with applicants in trying to resolve issues of the applications.
Well, prior to submitting my application, I had gone to the counter to talk to Mr. Coyne, Mr. Golick, and they indicated that, yeah, your application is okay, submitted, deemed complete, you're fine. But I'd like to just clarify one thing that Mr. Weimers just said about that property on Loma Vista. I requested information about, ADUs that were approved prior to the ordinance. And what I understand is that that property on Loma was not a garage. It was put down as an accessory structure. So I'm not sure where how that became a garage. But if it was an accessory structure, then it would have to comply with the no setback required for, existing garage. That one was approved, so mine was denied. But my whole point is that that no setback required for an existing garage, it's not really a standard. It's not a state standard. I always showed that. It says that a local agency can implement an ADU to include these standards. So I think that the whole time, staff has stated that the no setback shall be required for an existing garage. That's not true at all. That really has to be implemented in a ADU ordinance. And I showed that to you. I read the state standard to you. So it should not have been applied to my situation. It was complete per Mr. Andrew Coyne's definition of deemed complete. And there was nothing missing from my application at all. So staff can't make the claim that it was incomplete because it was not eligible. I mean, I'm not sure where that came from either. That's not even, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me because it's all about the law. It's all about the ADU law. If you have a deemed complete application, then you have to comply with the state standards.
Mayor Pro Tem, would you like to have some questions?
I just have one question. When they did tell you that that structure was unpermitted, they did give you alternatives to maybe how to get that building permitted so that you can continue?
I think at some point they did, but that was not an option that I wanted because I felt strongly about my case. I just feel like they could not deem my application incomplete. And I have already brought this up many times. I said, how did you deem my application incomplete based on something else other than the application? And I'm bringing that before your council tonight, and I guess I would hope that you can address that point. Why was my application not deemed complete based on the application?
But you do understand that that structure was unpermitted.
Yes.
So it doesn't exist in our eyes as far as any kind of code or any kind of state regulations or anything. It doesn't exist because it's not permitted. So we can't implement something on a structure that doesn't exist. That's what I'm saying. I just want to make sure that you understand that part. That's why you were told that it was not permitted.
Yes, I understand that.
Okay.
And I mentioned this earlier. Even unpermitted structures can be legalized. I mean, every jurisdiction allows you to do that.
Correct. I understand that.
And I'm a planner myself.
And staff
I
also
understand
told
the
you how to
ADU law.
do that, right? Staff also told you how you could possibly bring it up to so that it could be permitted, correct? They gave you suggestions, but you decided that you didn't want to do that.
Well, yes and no. Yes, and that I did want to legalize my structure, but
Okay.
no, because he said, or staff said that I needed a 10-foot setback, and because I felt my application was complete, and so it should have been reviewed under the state ADU law, which doesn't state what the setback is for non-garages. So by asking me to comply with the future city ADU setback when it didn't exist at that time, that's not fair. I mean, I couldn't understand it if my application was deemed incomplete for missing a form or something in the plans, but that was not the case. My application was complete. No missing application, plans, everything was complete. How was my application not deemed complete? Is there like another definition of deemed complete that that we don't know?
Okay, thank you.
So maybe Mayor Pro Tem, since you asked that question, I have a kind
No,
of
a follow-up. Go ahead.
Piggybacking on top of your question. It's actually a question for maybe our city attorney. It seems like the timing of the application, the applicant submitted it prior to when our ADU ordinance went into effect. So in terms of what law or ordinance is being applied to a project, where does that really stand?
Under California law, not only statutory but case law, unless the state statute defines what law applies at what specific time, the law that applies to the permit is what is in effect at the time the permit is to be issued, not when the application is filed. Under state law, no applicant has any type of vested right or otherwise in law that exists at the time they file an application. There's a weird rule for subdivisions, but that's not applicable here. So in this case, he files his application. I don't think we have the timeline up, but he files his application in late July, and our ordinance goes into effect in second week of August 14th. The ADU law simply has a 120-day shot clock. You have 120 days to review and issue the permit. So that permit should have been issued or denied within 120 days after July 24th. All that matters, not whether the application is deemed complete or whether or not, all that matters is whether or not the permit could have been issued within 120 days. The law that would have been applied during that time would have been the city's ordinance, not state background ADU law, but the city's ordinance, because the city's ordinance went into effect on August 14th, which was within the 120-day period and well before the city would have had to make a decision. But I will tell you that also is kind of a red herring, because the same result occurs whether you apply the ADU law that's in state law or our ordinance, because our ordinance is consistent with state law. Under state law and our ordinance, you have to start with a legal permitted structure. You have to have something that has been issued a building permit to start with. The applicant is correct that the ADU law does dispense with some zoning niceties, but it doesn't dispense with the requirement that you start with a structure that has a valid building permit issued. Housing and Community Development, which has issued a memo and then a model ordinance, takes a more aggressive stance on that, but that's not a regulation, it's not law, it's their recommendation, and it's not what the code says. So we do have to follow what either the state law says and then our ordinance. And state law is pretty clear that an existing structure is something that has a building permit issued to it. That's the problem here. Put setback aside for the moment. We don't start with the fundamental precondition that you have to have a structure that has a building permit issued to it, so that we can know that the underlying structure was at least reviewed and up to code at the time. If we don't start from that foundation, then every illegal structure becomes qualified to become something that people can live in. You know, every garden shed, every lean-to in somebody's backyard, everything that is built on the wall line or is not been inspected or permitted becomes eligible to be brought up to code and have people live in it. Certainly it was the intent of the legislature to be able to have more housing, but if you read all of the housing laws, they all say that they're supposed to be safe, decent places to live. You don't start creating safe, decent places for people to live by starting with illegal, unpermitted structures as your foundation. So I think that's where staff was coming from. You never get out of the gate, it's an illegal structure. Could the applicant have brought that structure up to code? Could the applicant have come into staff during this period and said, look, we didn't build this, I know it's not permitted, what do I do with it? I'm stuck, how do I get this to be an ADU? Yes, that could have happened. It did not happen, and in fact, staff went beyond the 120-day shot clock, left the file open, waited for additional feedback from the applicant, and didn't close out the file until January 18th, an abundance of time to come up with other options, but we didn't have one here.
May I respond?
Thank you. Give us a second here.
Okay.
I want to make sure that other council members also get to ask questions before we turn it over back to you. So, Councilmember Chavez.
Lawyers must be thinking alike all the time because you took all my questions and answered them. Putting aside all this deemed complete or not incomplete, I believe it's your position that state law should apply here. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so then how do you respond to staff's position then that even under state law, the structure is not existing and the structure was not a garage? So how do you win there? Can you respond to that?
Yes. Okay, so I've already addressed this in my presentation, and again, I'm going to say this, that the existing, the no setback for an existing garage is not a state standard at all.
Yeah, I'm not asking about setbacks or anything. I'm talking about how do you respond to the position that staff is taking that the structure is not existing and the structure is not a garage? So in other words, how are they? How is it existing and how is it a garage?
Okay. Well, first of all, I know that my structure was not a garage. I know that. Yeah. But the point is that staff keeps on bringing up this existing garage as if it's a state standard. It's not. It has to be implemented in a ordinance in order for that to be to be effective.
So are you saying that under state law, any structure, whether it's a garage or not existing, can be turned into an ADU?
Well, the ADU is just one of those things where just, people are taking advantage of, and I'm not saying that's a good thing, but I'm just saying that prior to the effective date of any ADU ordinance, people submit applications, and if they can bring it up to code, building code, then I guess they get approved. And
But let's
that's
say you
basically
had brought it up to code. Then it maybe, let's assume that, as I think it was mentioned by our city attorney, that there were ways perhaps that you could have brought it up to code, but you didn't do anything to that effect. And to me, looking at the timelines, even if you had, by the time you did that, it would have been too late to apply state law, correct?
Well, okay, my position is that by bringing up the code, I should have been able to keep the same setback, because in the state ADU law, it doesn't mention anything about zoning setbacks, only that you still have to comply with building code.
I don't even think we even need to get to setback. That applies once you even qualify, and I don't even know that you even qualify, because I don't see an existing structure, nor do I see a garage in this application.
Again, you're basing that on something that has to be implemented in an ordinance, but you can't do that before the ordinance is adopted.
Well, I think that was the law in effect at the time, even before ordinance went into effect.
No, if you look at the state ADU law.
I have looked at it.
Right,
I'm
right.
asking you to give me why should we rule in your favor? I haven't heard anything.
Because,
of that.
okay, well, because the ADU law doesn't say that you have to be an existing garage, because that language is only, used to, to protect the garage as a special class of structures that cannot be constrained by setback. That's the only reason that I think that standard or that language was put in there. And it's not to use to imply that setback should be, be like, not to say that you have to have what setback for, non-garages. So again, it's all about the state law. And in the city's ADU ordinance, it says that, your application has to be deemed complete. And then again, I brought this up a few times. What is deemed complete? If Mr. Andrew Coyne said that your application, your plans, everything is, complete, then you have a deemed complete application. Why can't we even address that or acknowledge that?
Okay. Mr. Kuo, I'm giving you the fact that, let's say it is complete. Okay, let's
Okay.
assume that. Tell me again, was this a garage and was it an existing structure?
Okay, it's an existing
And what is
structure.
your basis for that?
I'm sorry?
And what is your basis for that?
Okay, so it's an existing structure, and so let's say my application was deemed
But
complete.
you knew it didn't have a permit, correct?
Right.
So how
Well,
could it
let
be an
me
existing
explain
structure?
if I can, please.
Okay, I just want to kind
Yeah.
of focus your answers a little
Okay,
bit more.
so my garage or my accessory structure, let's say it was deemed complete, that means that I would have to comply with state standards, and state standards don't say anything about setback for, zoning setback.
You still go to setbacks, and
It's
I'm
all-
not asking
it's all
about
about setback.
setbacks. Okay, I'm sorry. I think you've answered my question. Thank you.
Mayor, could I clarify something about garages and setbacks, since we keep hearing about them?
Sure.
The reason we're talking about a garage isn't because the ADU law requires only garages to be converted into ADUs. Any accessory structure that's legal can be converted, long as it's in a single-family zone on a lot with an existing home. The point about the garage here is that the storage unit or unpermitted building, I'm not sure what we're calling it, doesn't meet city's existing setbacks, and it wouldn't have met the setbacks under the new ordinance. The ADU law does allow cities in their ordinance to impose a setback requirement. What staff was doing was saying, look, if we can find that this storage shed has a permit, then we can argue that it is part and parcel of the garage and apply the exemption for garages that are in state law that says we don't have to worry about the setback. That would have allowed the applicant to proceed. So it was actually to his benefit for us to find a way for this to be considered to be a garage. If it's not a garage, then it has to meet either the setback requirements that are in our ordinance or, and there are setback requirements in the ADU, there is a section that specifically says that accessory structures, including but not limited to studios, pool houses, or other similar structures, have to have a setback that is side and rear setbacks that are sufficient for fire safety. So that would have been the other requirement. Now you've seen the pictures of these. These are all very close to the wall. It's unknown whether or not that would have been sufficient for fire safety. It wouldn't have met our ordinance, and I don't know that it would have met, or at least our position is, it wouldn't have met this condition of state law. The provision that the applicant keeps referring to about the garage is in fact something that the city would have had to apply or could have utilized even if it didn't have an ordinance. It's in state law, and the way the ADU statute reads is that if we don't have one, we have to apply all of these provisions that are in here. And there's the garage exemption, and here's the other requirement about accessory structures and fire safety zones for the things. Those are all part and parcel in here. Our ordinance is consistent with that. So the only way that he would have had this is if he had a building permit for the accessory structure and it was considered integral to the garage so that we didn't have to look at the setback requirements. That's why staff approached it in that manner. It wasn't a way to try to cheat him out of anything. It was actually a way to try to help further his project.
So the hope was that somehow he can prove that there was a permit that showed that it was an existing garage, and then none of this all that would go away.
Well, we do know that there was a permit for an existing garage. What we don't have is a permit for the... Correct, it doesn't include the add-on.
structure in
And if there
question.
was a permit for the add-on, we could have argued that it was an integrated structure that was a garage. It could have been appropriate to develop, and we wouldn't have had to look at setback requirements.
Okay. Councilmember Sternquist?
Along with that, Mr. Vale, then the home on Loma, which was approved, actually had both components of accessory dwelling, which was the carport that was integrated with the garage, correct? And so that actually met those standards together, and then it was actually permitted, both as an accessory dwelling, as a garage and a carport.
I believe that to be the case, but I'm not familiar and wasn't involved with that. I'd have to refer it over to Mr. Reavers.
Okay. Can I go?
Yes.
So with that being said, I think there's a huge difference between your property and what you were asking for or are asking for in comparing it to Loma, because you did say that you understood that yours was not a garage, correct? And that it was an accessory dwelling, but it was an unpermitted accessory dwelling. But the main condition for converting, the way I understand it, an accessory dwelling unit or an accessory structure to an ADU, the very first requirement is that it must be a legally constructed or a
Permitted structure.
a permitted, legally constructed or constructed under the standards of the city, the ordinances, and that it needed to be permitted. Neither of those options or those things that you needed were there from the time you went to the counter to ask for a permit to do an ADU. So I'm not sure if you understand that there is a huge difference between what is the bottom line or foundation of what the state ordinance is. And that is to have an accessory structure to be legally constructed and permitted. You had neither of those, and you admitted that you didn't have a permitted dwelling and that it wasn't a garage. So right from the get-go, there was an issue. And I don't know how you could have had a completed application when you didn't meet the initial requirement for applying. My concern with that is when you come to the counter, that information should have been given to you. First of all, you don't have you don't meet the state requirement here, so you're not going to meet the city requirement. And these are some options that you have. You have a legally constructed garage that you could apply for an ADU. That is what I'm hoping took place. I don't know what took place because I wasn't there, but it seems that if you were given that information at that time or soon after, when someone actually took the time to look into the application more thoroughly, they would have seen, well, this is an unpermitted structure and it's not a garage, and from right off the bat, it can't be complete because it doesn't meet any of the requirements. And I'm not sure that how can you change my mind about that? I mean, it is an appeal and I want to listen to you, but when you don't meet the initial criteria for applying, and you said you did know that it was unpermitted, I mean, to me, that's the most important factor here, is that it's an unpermitted structure, and the state required it to be a legally constructed and permitted structure.
True. Look,
I mean, I'm not
can I
a
respond?
legal expert, but I believe that's what I read when I did review the state criteria. I don't know, Mr. Vail, do you happen to have that in anywhere that is what the state required it to be legally permitted? I thought I read it. I read it over numerous times, and maybe I missed something, but.
The state ADU ordinance just refers to existing structure.
Mm-hmm.
Our read of the ordinance is that it has to be a legal, permitted structure. The applicant takes a different view. He says, no, it doesn't have to be a legal, permitted structure. Our read of the ordinance is based on how state law has been interpreted and the fact that in California, no one has a right to an unpermitted illegal structure. The city can require them to be taken down at any point in time. So from our perspective, the only thing that the legislature could have meant by existing structure is a legally permitted structure. The applicant disagrees and takes an alternative view. He reads language out of well, I don't want to make his argument for him, but I believe the argument to be that he looks at the model HCD ordinance that says, in essence, it doesn't have to be a permitted structure. A non-permitted structure can be qualified.
With the little that I know about real estate, I know that when you go to sell a property and you have an unpermitted, say an unpermitted family room or an unpermitted bedroom, real estate law requires the seller of that property to eliminate the square footage of that bedroom or that family room, and it becomes non-existent. And that's kind of the way I interpret this also.
It's very much the same principle. That's right. If it's not legally permitted, it doesn't legally exist.
And if it doesn't legally exist, how can you turn in an application?
My argument is that you can't.
Well, people legalize structures.
I mean, that you can turn it in, but you still have to
Correct.
meet the requirements.
Right, and you said that my structure doesn't meet the criteria for existing garage. That depends on which code you're looking at. If you're saying that my application was deemed incomplete, then yes, you're right. It doesn't meet the city's ADU code. But if it was deemed complete, then it would have to follow state standards. And then again, the state standards don't say anything about existing garage as a state standard. It says a local agency may, by ordinance, provide for the creation of So that's the language that states that you have to implement an ADU ordinance to have that language about existing garage. And getting back to the property on Loma, it's not it's existing per the definition that you have. Yes, it's existing, but it's not a garage. So at that point,
It is permitted.
it's permitted, but then it's not a garage. So how could you,
How do you know it's not a garage? How do you know it's not a garage?
Because I was
Staff-
told by staff.
No,
Yeah,
staff is saying that it is a garage. Is that it's a garage / carport?
We have a permit on file that we can give to the city council.
Okay,
That my understanding was it was a carport / garage,
right. So I think
permitted.
we have the permit to show that. So I don't think that's. I would suggest that you not build on that point because you're going against the fact here, unfortunately.
Okay, well,
Mr. Poe, can I ask you also, have you thought about converting your garage into an ADU?
No.
That is an option that it's available to you,
That's the.
that can be permitted, correct,
in case
Scott?
somebody wants to see it.
Not anymore now?
Not anymore, it needs to be comply with setback requirement now.
Okay,
No, you can convert the garage.
you cannot.
You can.
You can.
That's in the state law.
Yeah, but how about the setback requirements?
The state law says that you can impose setback requirements for existing garages.
That's true. Yeah, I stand to be correct, an existing
You
garage.
still need to comply with the building code requirements.
Right, so then I am correct in that he does have the option to convert his garage.
Correct.
You do have that ability, sir.
I understand that, but I
And then the
think,
state law doesn't require you to put one back. In other words, you don't. I mean, typically.
You don't have to replace the garage.
Right, we typically
Right.
require all houses, all property in our city to have a
You know.
garage, but
Yeah.
ADU trumps that, state ADU law trumps.
And I must say, I personally know many people who have converted their garages in for the cost of, you can convert a garage from what I understand between $30,000 and $40,000. It might initially sound like that is a lot of money, but a lot of these ADUs are not being used for families. That's a fact also. They're not being used for extended family. A lot of them are being used for extended income that people would like to get. We have to comply with, the state says you have to have ordinance for ADUs, but you have an option to convert your garage. And I just wanted to make sure that you know that that is still an option for you, and to do it legally constructed and permitted.
well, can I ask you a question?
You may.
So people do have unpermitted structures, and again, I am not advocating for unpermitted structures. So what happens to these people? So they have to meet current standards for the new use, right? So why? So what were you telling me that is that I can't legalize my structure because it's unpermitted, but you have to start somewhere. You have to put in the application. You try to meet the code, the zoning code, at the time that you submit it. So that's what I'm trying to do. I submitted my application at the time the state standard. The city ADU ordinance was not in effect. So what kind of code did I have? I only had the state code, and then my application was definitely deemed complete per the definition of deemed complete. So how was it not deemed complete?
Well,
Why is it based on something else?
You did have the state code, as you say, but what you did not have was the city. You could not prove to the city, and I don't think you still can at this point, that was legally constructed and it was permitted. There's a process for that, and unfortunately, I don't know if you built this or the people that you purchased the home from, but it is unpermitted, and it is not, was in the city's view, how do they know if it was legally constructed?
Right, so yes, it
And
was.
in regards to the current people who have, are using garages not legally permitted, I have to tell you that this city does an excellent job with code enforcement. And it's a city of, well, how many square miles are we? 5 or 4 square? 4 square miles and 37,000 residents. It's impossible for the city in any one day to let you know who is doing what illegally in their homes. And we try our best if there's a, someone reports something or someone sees someone building something and they don't think they have a permit. The city is extremely conscientious regarding this because if there's ever phone calls that I think we as council members get, it's about someone saying, somebody next door to me, I think, is doing something without a permit. So, I mean, because somebody is doing something that shouldn't be done, or they're not doing it in a legal manner for the city, doesn't mean that,
Right.
we should let something else go on that's not permitted.
Right, so let's get back to the question of, so what happens when somebody has, let's say, an unpermitted addition to the house? Let's not say a garage conversion. Let's say just an unpermitted structure. So how do people legalize their unpermitted additions? If they cannot meet the setback, then they would have to remove it. But if they can, then they can be approved for the addition. And basically,
I'm not
that's
an
what
expert,
I'm trying to say.
Mr. Qual, on that, but I'm sure staff can help you with that. But I know there have been instances, one on my block specifically north of me, that had to remove an unpermitted
Yes,
family
and I
room.
understand that. And there are cases like that when they can't meet standards, they have to remove. But for me, my application was submitted before the ADU ordinance. I wouldn't have to comply with the city ordinance. The ADU ordinance, it would just be the state standard. State standards don't say anything about setback for, existing, structure. I mean, nothing about setback, like no zoning setback. But of course, once you pass, planning, you get planning approval, you proceed to the next step. And then if you don't comply with building code, you will get denied. You may have to remove it, but that's not the job of planning to do, right? So you only get to that point after you get planning approval first. You cannot say somebody does not comply with fire setback or building code setback. You can't say that because that's not the job of planning.
Okay, so Mr. Kuo, if I could maybe summarize some key points of our understanding of your position is, one, you feel your application was complete. You feel that your understanding of the state ADU law at that time is that there is nothing speaking to whether existing structures should be legally permitted.
Yes, that is
correct. Which is why you're saying that despite not having a permit for a structure, you're claiming that the state ADU does not define clearly that an existing structure must be permitted. And because you're going by the state law, you are saying that we should have allowed the conversion of that structure to an ADU, regardless of setback requirements.
Technically, according to the state law.
As is, right? As is. You're saying that the structure as it stands, you feel that your interpretation of the state law should have allowed you to move forward and converted your unpermitted structure into a legal ADU.
Yes.
And that you are separating the zoning aspect of it with the building code aspect, which you claim can be brought into compliance at a later stage.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you. So I just want to clarify your position. At this point, unless there are further council questions, I'd like to open this up for public comment. Is there anyone from the public that'd like to speak on this matter? All right, seeing none, I will close public comment. For council discussion, maybe I'd like to ask Councilmember Yu to maybe
Okay, yes, Mayor.
start us off?
I think the matter before us is really not that complicated. I think both the state and the city ordinance are really complementary. They're really not that different. I think the only thing that I think the applicants have pointed time and time pointed to the fact that if it happened in a garage, then the city would not be able to impose a setback requirement. Because what we're really looking at, the structure contains two parts. One is a legally permitted garage. The other side is as far as we know, and the applicant admitted to, an unpermitted, or if you will, an illegal structure that is apparently it's used as a storage room, some sort, or some kind of accessory use. So there are really two ways to convert. Either we look at the garage and then convert the garage like Councilmember Sternquist has suggested, then setback law would not be imposed. And then had the applicant been converting the illegal structure or the unpermitted structure, then if the zoning laws and I think we all alluded to, then the fact that it's not permitted, the fact that would apply. Now, I am actually of the opinion, I do agree with the applicant to some degree, that the city, and historically all cities, all municipalities, we do allow people to legalize, if you will, unpermitted structures. If an applicant can prove to the city that you can bring everything up to today's code, building codes, and also zoning codes. So in my mind, the applicant could have legalized that structure at the time of his application. However, if you look at the plan of that structure, having that structure behind the main house, there's no way it would be, even if you tried to legalize it, no way can be converted into garage because there's no way to drive in and out. Without driveway, any room attached to a garage, unless it's just a tiny little room, cannot be, I mean, with the size of it, in my mind, could not really be considered a garage. So in any case, if it's not garage, it has to comply with the setback laws. Now, the state law and really and the city code, like Mr. Vale had pointed out, you are supposed to comply with the city's ordinance at the time of permitted of issuance of permits. If Mr. Koo were to legalize the structure, it has to be done within that window, and he actually did not proceed. And that's why we asked the question, why is he not coming back and work with staff to try to legalize? However, in my mind, I've been trying very hard to find a way to help the applicant to resolve it, and I think that the commission, and I would speak for staff, I think we'll all try to do that, but that it is, no matter how we slice it, it is not a garage. So that section within the state law that says no setback shall be required of an existing garage, we cannot really use that. Then the only other option is to legalize it, but then the setback laws will kick into place. Actually, even Mr. Kuo, even before the city had formalized the setback laws, the ADU laws, setback requirements have always been in place in the city. So I don't know. There's just I've been trying to find a way to do it, and I just could not find a way to uphold the applicant's appeal. And I just want to also say a couple other things. In the fact that staff had called this an incomplete, actually, in my mind, and also the discussion with the city attorney, it's a way to actually help the applicant, because if it's got outright denied, there's no way to really work on the applications, and staff been calling it incomplete to allow the applicant more time to work out a solution. So, and then the other part I have some trouble with is that Oftentimes applicants will come to us and point out other cases. I guess unless it's really like a case law, something, a court issue, we really cannot easily look at a similar or apparently similar construction case, because there are many nuances for other building and other construction. We're here to really look at this case. We're really not to look at Loma. We're not here to look at other construction. So I really don't pay a lot of attention to why the Loma was constructed. I was trying to look at this case and see if there is any other way to allow it. I just cannot find any way to do so.
All right, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Hold on a second. Well, Mr. Coe, first of all, I can appreciate that you're trying to help out your father by having to find someone, having him live behind you. But what I'm hearing from everyone, including staff, is really the bottom line is you are trying to work with a structure that is not a legal permitted structure. You can't impose any kind of rules, regulations, or codes on something where we don't know when it was built. We don't know if it was built to any kind of our requirements or standards. So we have to start out with that particular thing before we move forward in any case, regardless of setbacks, regardless of state regulations, regardless of anything that the city council has done. You have to have a starting point, and the starting point is that that structure is legally permitted. Now, I do believe staff did a great job in trying to give you some suggestions to possibly bringing it up to code, or converting the actual garage, which would help you in the fact that maybe you wouldn't have to do so much to the structure. I don't know what you would do with the other structure, but you could convert the garage. So I too have been trying to look for maybe some kind of a compromise, but you can't compromise when you have nothing to base it on as far as it being an actual structure that exists in the eyes of the city. So unfortunately, I would have to deny the request. I'm sure staff would help you if you wanted to get more information about possibly converting the garage. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I
Councilmember
can't talk.
Chavez?
I tend to agree with Vince in his interpretation. I think that staff, as well as our city attorney, has correctly interpreted both state law and our local ordinances as it applies to this case. I haven't heard any new information tonight that would change that. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Sternquist?
I agree with my colleagues. I think just sometimes the connotation of the word complete, when maybe things are complicated or confusing, there's state law, there's local law. And, I think when you turn in something and someone says, it's complete, you think of it as, everything is done. I don't need to do anything else. And I think incomplete is basically, there's things that need to be done. I don't know if maybe telling the applicants that, your application is in review, or I don't know. I mean, maybe that's terminology that, planners use all the time, but I think sometimes to the average citizen, I mean, sometimes things are complete. I mean, I can just use a simple example for me when I was teaching, and, give an assignment, there's 10 problems, and child holds it up and says, I completed everything. And then you're like, okay, well, did you look at your work? Yeah, it's fine, I completed everything. And then I get the paper and it was complete, but there was, lots of errors sometimes. I mean, in planning, I'm assuming that when things are complete, they're done, right? They don't need to move forward with anything else from the application standpoint. But when something, let me ask Mr. Reimers, when an applicant is told that things are incomplete, they must be given reasons, correct?
Right.
And how you go about to complete something if it indeed is possible.
Yes, we give them direction of what needs to be. Yes, in our incomplete letters, we give them information on what needs to be submitted in order to be made complete, and we provide also corrections that need to be made to the plans.
Right. So I think it's, that is a time when you're reviewing it, and that's not done at the counter. And oftentimes I think things can get misinterpreted at the counter, because sometimes when you're the applicant, you kind of hear what you hope you want to hear. And if something's complicated or confusing, I could see how, things can be misinterpreted. But if you're giving clear direction and you're telling them this is what needs to be done. Mr. Poe, I understand how valuable that property is, and how valuable it would be to you to be able to have your father or family members in there. And I think there's still a way for you to be able to do that. Unfortunately, I don't think that your argument was compelling enough to have me think that staff didn't do as much as they could to work with you and give you direction to help you see that from the beginning, it was a no-go, in my opinion. But I would encourage you to work with staff again if you really want to do an ADU, and wish you all the best with that. And that's it.
All right, thank you. I think my fellow colleagues have covered almost everything, so I'm not going to repeat a lot of what has been said. Again, it goes, I think Mayor Pro Tem said it very well. I think your starting point was the key issue here, and I was trying really hard to put myself in your perspective and to try to interpret the existing part as including unpermitted structures. And I don't know if you know, but part of my day job on the county side is, part of it is doing plan check as well. And we deal with unpermitted structures all the time. And I can't think of a single case where we would allow the unpermitted structure as a starting point for building on top of additional information. So if we did allow that, I think, I don't want, maybe it creates a slippery slope for a host of other potential applicants that come flooding in saying, well, yeah, this is, I know it's unpermitted, but, I'm trying to apply, I want to apply, I want to forget about the zoning part of the law, but I want to just prove that I can build it up to the building code standards, because that's based on life safety, and zoning is more of a planning issue. So while I appreciate you, I must admit the way you approach this is very creative. I don't think I could have came up with this type of an argument myself. And similarly, I want to echo what Councilmember you had brought up. The questions I had asked staff when this was brought to our attention was to try to find a solution for you, understanding that your ultimate goal is to provide a space for your relatives. And it seems like, as my fellow colleagues have said, that option remains open. So if that truly is your ultimate goal, then that seems like the most viable path forward for you. So having said that, if I could have a motion for this item.
Tom, you want to do
Oh,
that?
I'll make a motion. I would like to make a motion, would it be to deny?
To adopt resolution.
I'd like to make it I'm sorry, my voice, to adopt resolution number 18-5341, denying file number PL 17879.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Chavez?
Yes.
Councilmember Sternquist?
Yes.
Councilmember Yu?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Fish?
Yes.
Mayor Mann?
Yes. So that resolution has been adopted. So we move on to item 9, unfinished business. We have none. New business. 10A, we have the presentation on mobile source air pollution reduction. We have a presentation from our Parks and Rec Director, Kathy Burrows.
Take her a minute, Mayor Mann, to come up, but this is part of the AQMD funding, that part of it which you funded through the budget, but this grant opportunity came up, and as part of that grant opportunity process, we have to give you this full presentation of the MSRC funding. So with that, Ms. Burrows.
Thank you. Good evening, council members. I'll try to make this as brief as possible. As indicated by City Manager Cook, this is an additional funding source for the purchase of city vehicles. One of the requirements of the grant application is that the city council or the board of directors, whatever the governing body is, must receive this presentation, a PowerPoint presentation from the MSRC. So we'll go through that quickly and then ask the council to adopt the resolution attached that authorizes us to apply for the grant. So the Local Government Partnership Program is funded through the MSRC. The MSRC is a Mobile Source Air Pollution Reduction Review Committee. It was established by California legislature in 1990, and their sole purpose is to invest funds to reduce air pollution that is caused by mobile sources, cars, trucks, buses, etc. The MSRC works closely with the South Coast AQMD. However, it is not a regulatory agency such as the AQMD. They invest in the clean air projects that support the AQMD. The reason that they're providing this funding source is that, according to the South Coast AQMD, the region is in a non-attainment area for ozone and other particles. There are significant challenges in regards to the air quality in our district still. Therefore, mandatory reductions are needed at this point. So the AQMD adopted a air quality management plan in 2016. This kind of outlines how the South Coast AQMD will go about reducing the emissions. The MSRC is partnering with the AQMD to implement high priority strategies in that plan. Some of them include traditional regulatory measures, or the plan includes traditional regulatory measures and incentive-based strategies. So the MSRC has reserved funding for each agency in the district under the Local Government Partnership Program. The incentive-based programs are designed to accelerate the introduction of key technologies, including zero and non-zero emission vehicles. Participation is 100% voluntary. They reserve funding for every jurisdiction. You just need to apply for it and qualify. So that's the MSRC presentation that we have to provide. So let me get a little bit into how Temple City would like to use these funds. Cities and counties that receive an annual allocation of AB 2766 subvention funds less than $50,000, of which Temple City is one, are eligible to receive an MSRC partnership match of $50,000. Eligible project categories include the purchase or lease of light-duty zero-emission vehicles, and other vehicles. Light-duty zero-emission vehicles include battery, electric, and fuel cell vehicles. The MSRC funding can be used to fund a maximum of 50% of a qualifying vehicle's net purchase price or up to $10,000 per vehicle, whichever is less. Matching funds are required. However, it is the desire, the request of the MSRC that the participating cities and counties use their AB 2766 funds instead of general funds as the match. Our recommendation, we had put in the budget to purchase 2 Polaris Ranger EV electric carts for use at Live Oak Park and Temple City Park that will be replacing our 2002 GEM carts that are, one is currently not usable at all, the other one is barely hanging on. Each is approximately $15,000.
Quick question on that.
Yes.
Do we have to, like, sounds like these are electric vehicles? Do we have to, like, provide
They are,
charging stations or any
no,
changes?
they can
to
be
the
charged with a regular outlet,
Oh,
similar
good.
to our GEM.
Cool.
So the requirements to participate, as was mentioned earlier, present the PowerPoint presentation to each participating city council or board to be eligible. Obtain a resolution acknowledging receipt of the presentation, authorizing the proposed project, and allocating the necessary matching funds. Prepare a project implementation plan, a proposed budget, submit an implementation schedule, and the applications are due by August 2nd, which is why we're bringing this up to your attention at this point. Before I get into the recommendations, as I mentioned, we are proposing 2 Polaris vehicles. We have spoken with the MSRC representatives. We were originally going to be replacing our GEMs with similar GEM carts. However, the MSRC is requiring that there be a vehicle that is a comparable vehicle that is gas-powered. And the GEM carts do not have a comparable gas-powered vehicle, whereas the Polaris do have gas vehicles. I should mention that if we did not have AQMD or this MSRC funding, we would likely be recommending purchase of gas-powered vehicles because first of all, they're less expensive normally to purchase, and they usually have a little bit more power than the electric. However, because we have this funding source, we felt it was the best option for the city to use these electric vehicles instead. Each vehicle, and I've attached it to your staff report, is about $16,000. Because the MSRC will fund only half of it, we're requesting $8,000 from MSRC funding and the other $8,000 through our AQMD AB 2766 funds.
Is that per vehicle?
Yes. So at this time, we are recommending that the council adopt resolution number 18-5342 and authorize staff to submit the proposal to the MSRC to partially fund the purchase of the 2 electric utility vehicles.
Okay, thank you. Are there any council questions?
Just one? Isn't there anything else we can purchase that we need to use up to that $50,000 match?
Not at this point. One of the reasons we're recommending that we move forward with this instead of just using our AQMD monies is, I would say probably within the next 5 years or so, our city boom truck is going to need to be replaced. They are now starting to make those type of large vehicles available in alternate fuels. I wouldn't recommend purchasing anything yet, but probably in 5 years they would be much more further along.
Tesla will be making them.
They're significantly more than this in the $200,000 range. So if we can save our AQMD monies and other funding sources for that purpose. We did confirm with AQMD, by the way, that the subvention funds do not have a time frame when they need to be used. So we get, I believe it's about $47,000, $48,000 a year. We don't have to spend those within a certain period of time, so we can accumulate them. Currently, we're using those to fund some of the leases on some of the vehicles, the hybrid vehicles that we lease through Enterprise.
I'm happy to know that we're using those funding. Michael Cacciati who works, with AQMD, gave a presentation, and I believe of our 18 cities, only 2 had applied. So he was encouraging the representatives at the cities to go back to their councils and encourage them to spend some of this money that was available. So,
How about other vehicles, the electric vehicles? I mean, I know we have a lot of hybrids in the city. Is there any possibility with maybe down the road using electric vehicles, hybrids?
Yeah, well, once our enterprise lease agreement comes up, and they're going to be, we're on the almost third year of that lease. We'll evaluate those
Right.
as well, and then the AQMD is used to the leasing program, so we'll evaluate those as those are coming up.
Does Enterprise have those type of vehicles?
When at the time of the lease, when we were doing it, it was not that it wasn't an option. It wasn't just the cost effectiveness, and plus getting the AQMD funds for the hybrids was the kind of more cost effective way of doing it. But we'll reevaluate that as that comes.
All right. Are there any other council questions? All right. Seeing none, I will open the public comment. Is there anyone who would like to comment on this item? Seeing none, I will close public comment. Any additional council discussion? All right. If none, may I have a motion?
Mayor Man, I would make a motion that we adopt Resolution 18-5342 and authorize staff to submit a proposal to the MSRC to partially fund the purchase of 2 electric utility vehicles.
I'll second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. May we have the roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Chavez?
Yes.
Councilmember Sternquist?
Yes.
Councilmember Yu?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Fish?
Yes.
Mayor Mann?
Yes. All right. Moving on to item 11, communications. We have none. Next, we have an update from our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Mann, members of the council. Just a quick update on the Temple City Library. The county and the city have selected a artist that the county library has worked with before, Louis Griffin. She's going to be coming up with an interesting concept, which I'll be able to share with you about. I don't want to spill the beans too much right now, but it's a concept of kind of structures and ideas of watching a child grow up through the library, and as a child, and as an adolescent, and all the way through. So it'll be an interesting concept, and we'll have more than enough money raised through the fundraising program that we've done to cover all of her costs and the construction costs going forward. And then hopefully in the next couple months, we'll have the bid documents ready for approval, and that will go out to bid, knock on wood, by sometime before the end of this year. Happy 4th of July to all, safe. There will be an extensive patrols out starting, not going to disclose exactly what time, but it's just tomorrow evening into the late morning. So please do not, if you need to celebrate safe and sane, there are fireworks displays throughout the San Gabriel Valley. I'll be at one adjoining city tomorrow evening with my son. So it's not a safe practice. It really isn't. And we just look toward your community's compliance. The fine can be up to $5,000, a very substantial fine. So we ask for the community's cooperation and appreciate it. So thank you, Mayor.
Great. Thank you. Update from Mr. City Attorney.
None this evening, other than please enjoy your 4th of July.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you. Council reports regarding ad hoc or standing committee meetings. Do we have any?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to report back on the future development of city properties standing committee meeting. This special meeting consists of Mayor Min and myself. We met with the city manager and city staff on Friday, June 22nd. There are a number of agenda items. We talked about mainly a lot of we talk about the preliminary findings of the current parking studies of downtown Temple City. And in a nutshell, we're really not finding a lack of parking per se, but the distribution is an issue, and the utilization of all the different. There are lots that are always full. There are lots that are not full. We also talk about the Primrose property that the city had purchased in some years past. We the staff reported on a demolition schedule and a schedule moving forward. We also discussed preliminary redevelopment concepts for the Primrose property in conjunction with the parking concept, because we were also looking at potential use of the Primrose property for parking, and various options were discussed, from all parking to a mixture of parks, community building, and gymnasium, senior center, and to maybe a structured parking. So the subcommittee, the standing committee's recommendation was that all these options should be presented to the city council for consideration. So we'll meet in maybe another month's time. I think we set a schedule to meet in a month, just to preview the standing committee, the staff's presentation, and then immediately bring that back to the full city council for consideration as to what our next step needs to be. So it's very exciting to see the possibilities for those sites.
Great.
Yeah, and
is
if I may add, part of the presentation was given by Mr. David Goodall, who had worked with us on multiple projects throughout the city. And I really appreciate him and staff coming up with these creative ideas for this space, because kind of like similar to previous discussions on the 5800 property, this area potentially has a bit more potential just due to not just the size of it, but also the fact that we own some of the adjacent existing parking lots. And so I think all the options that we are recommending being brought to for full council discussion, what I would expect is that we really get into sort of our vision for that portion of the downtown. I mean, we talk a lot about the engineering and the architecture planning aspect behind it, but to me, I think really the ultimate question is, what is our vision for that portion of our downtown in the long term? Because the choices we make now on what to do with it, we should be making towards that ultimate goal.
Right. Just to add a little bit more to it, and I think the council and other conventions might have talked about parking, the future of parking, and whether or not we as a community will be having the same kind of parking needs in 20, 30 years, especially with the advent of shared
ride
sharing, and the like Lyft and Uber and that kind of a newer thinking. So, or self-driving cars, for that matter. You can have a car, just send your car home, for example, instead of parking at that place and come and pick you up, that kind of concept. So actually our parking study, our consultant will actually making a projection as to what that future may hold. So it's very exciting. So we'll be coming back to the council for presentation.
Great.
Great.
All right, thank you. Do we have any other ad hoc or standing committee reports? No? So since we're on this item, I would like to actually disband the city commissioner recruitment appointment ad hoc committee, since they've completed the task at hand.
Excellent.
Okay. And so moving on to 15, council items separate from the regular agenda. Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Mayor Mann. As many of you know, unfortunately, we've lost two long-term residents of our city over the past couple of weeks. The first, Michael Riffey, he and his wife Ann lived in the city for over 50 years. Both their kids attended Temple City schools, but Mike's main claim to fame was as a member of the Tournament of Roses. He was actually the president of the Tournament of Roses back in 2003, his parade 2004 entitled Music, Music, Music. And unfortunately, he passed away on June 13th after a long illness. Very involved with the community. Used to see him around at concerts in the park and various things. So, of course, we wish his family the best. And, of course, Mary Kakeko passed away last week. Jerry, you might remember we always referred to the three, the Mary, and Jerry show. Mary Kakeko, Jerry Jambazian, and I've lost Mary Burke. Yeah, who passed away a number of years ago. So, not to put any pressure on you, but you're the final one of that group, so hopefully you'll be around for a while. But I had the opportunity to visit with Mary a few times. She was at a nursing facility right across the street from Live Oak Park, and during the times when I'd have baseball tournaments over there in between games or something, I'd sometimes go over there just to say hi and see how she was doing. But I think her services are next week as well. So I would ask Mayor Mann if we could close our meeting tonight in both of their honors, Mike Riffey and Mary Kakeko.
Certainly.
So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Yu.
Just want to say one comment in the appeal case today. Unfortunately, applicant has already left, but I think I just want to point out the fact that, with the city staff and the city, I think we're all trying to help him, and sometimes just the rules still have to be followed, and hope that he will come back and work with city staff to find an acceptable solution with him. And so, on the note of commission, are we bringing back a question for Mr. City Manager? We're bringing back the for consideration the potential of adding more.
Yes, Councilmember, you will bring that back for.
So, do you
Council's
know when about that might come before us?
I'll have to check the general planning calendar, but probably August.
August. That's why.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Sternquist.
Just a couple of things. Concert in the park. We've had 2 now, Kathy? 3? I think I missed the very first one. I was sick, but they've been wonderful. Thank you. This week, I think is it Friday and Saturday? It's supposed to be triple digits, so
Yes.
I'm hoping that we're going to open our cooling centers.
Mr. Arazumi's already on it.
Okay, so
As
that
well
will
as the
be
park
open
staff.
at Live Oak Park, correct?
Yes.
And Brian, what is the time?
The times are 7 a.m. till 10 p.m.
Okay.
Or the hours of the operation of Live Oak Park.
Okay. And I wanted to thank Brian Cook, our city manager, Brian Cook, and Kathy Burrows for jumping on the lift idea and reaching out to Monrovia's city manager and the work that you're doing. That's moving quickly. So I just wanted to thank you for that, and also for your help with the library and your enthusiasm with Louise and helping us go over what the design is going to look like. So thank you very much for that. Just want to wish everyone a happy 4th of July.
Great, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Fish.
Well, I'm coming back with an Australian cold, so I can't speak very well. I'll just quickly want to say, first of all, everyone, please be safe. Tomorrow's the 4th of July. We have a lot of things going on. That's the first thing. Second thing is I've been hearing a lot of great things about concerts in the park. I promise to come next week. I've missed the last 3. And then, as some of you may or may not know, I just got back on Sunday from 17 days in Australia. It was incredible. There were six of us, Americans, that went, and we were hosted by the Hawkesbury Sister Cities program. It was an adult trip, though. It was not a student trip. And if anyone's interested, they do the trip every 2 to 3 years. It is open to the public. It is very inexpensive. You do stay in the homes of the executive board of the Hawkesbury organization, and they they are wonderful. They plan all the excursions. You take the train, you take ferries, you get to do all kinds of things. It is winter there, so it's kind of strange coming back. I got off the plane in my Uggs and my sweatshirt, and it was 80 degrees here. The high was about 62 the whole time we were there. Beautiful, crisp, sun out, but it was definitely coat and scarf and glove weather. But I had a wonderful, fantastic time. I did want to read a letter. I'm not going to because I'm going to start coughing. I was hoping maybe you could read it for me. I did take... the City Council of Hawkesbury did invite us to a meet and greet, not an actual meeting, just a meet and greet to meet the mayor. And she was very gracious. It was wonderful. In case you don't know, Tom may know, in their City Hall they actually have a curio cabinet that has all the things from the Sister City, the American Sister City program. It has all the Temple City things in there, including Dodger things and Disneyland things, and it's just really amazing how much they cherish the relationship. You don't realize it until you get there. I know Tom can attest to that. They have lots of stories, lots of great friendships from going on 30 years of having these kids be able to live in homes. So I did take certificates. I took one for the Hawkesbury City Council. I took one for the president of the Sister Cities. And then I also took one who wrote this letter to us. She's a past Sister Cities president. She's been involved for 30 years. And she is actually the person that came in 1987, I believe, 83 or 80. She's the person that came from Australia and asked to have the program started. Her name is Yvonne Whalen, and she's a wonderful, wonderful woman. She's currently now retired off the board, but she had some great, wonderful stories. She's been over here quite a few times, so she wrote a letter here to the City Council. If you could read that for me. Sure. Thank you.
To the mayor and council members in the city of Temple City, I wish to acknowledge with much pleasure the certificate of recognition presented to me by Nanette Fish on behalf of your council. I was thrilled to receive the certificate and am humbled by all the kind words spoken by Nanette Fish at a function in Hawkesbury last week. My family's involvement with Temple City began in 1984 when I was the guest of Mayor Ken Gillanders, Mayor Ken Gillanders and his wife Helen, when our two sons and I traveled to the USA to defend their titles in water ski racing at Lake Mead and Lake Havasu. Since that time, I have enjoyed numerous visits to your city and have welcomed many Temple City visitors to our home and the Hawkesbury area. The experiences gained by students and adults alike from both of our cities have by far exceeded the expectations of both our committees when establishing this relationship. I hope that the friendships made within our Sister City program remain for many years to come. Once again, your thoughtfulness is much appreciated, and I will treasure this certificate of recognition. Yours in friendship, Mrs. Yvonne Whalen.
So, anyway, I thought that was really nice. And I was wondering, Jerry, if after the meeting, if you could take a picture of the City Council with our Australian hats on, and we could maybe print it and get it out to them. I think that'd be very nice. They're, like I said, it was wonderful. And it is open to the public. You do have to be an actual member of our Sister City programs here, the organization, but that's nothing. But like I said, don't miss this opportunity. It's a great opportunity, and especially to stay with people that live there. It's very, very nice. So, thank you.
All right.
Thank you for reading that.
Oh yeah, no, of course, and yeah, it's really wonderful that they do cherish the relationship.
They really do. Yeah,
that's really amazing and awesome.
Awesome.
So. And I'm glad you had a great time.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just want to report back. Last Friday, staff helped out with the second Facebook Live session. Mm-hmm. We kept it much shorter this time, 15 minutes, but had
awesome.
two special guests from our youth committee, Zoe and Chloe. And the inspiration initially started with wanting to get some of our senior, the graduating seniors from the youth committee to come on board, but there were some scheduling issues. And so, in fact, the same day that they were doing the Facebook Live session with me, they also were interviewed by a reporter from Singtel newspaper who they had met at the one networking event that I had brought them along with me. And so I didn't think she was actually serious when we talked to her saying that she was going to write an article about them. I'll send a link to our city manager. Maybe we could get that translated to English and share with everyone. Unfortunately, at least to my knowledge, I don't think the Singtel newspaper has an English version of their news articles. At least I can't find one.
No, I don't think they do.
Yeah. So, and it was kind of nice because I think that their kind of interaction with the reporter was like a warm up for the Facebook Live session, and so they did fantastic job with the questions, and I just wanted to give them an opportunity to kind of use a different platform to kind of let everyone know what kind of stuff our youth committee is doing. And of course, I'll give another shout out to Councilmember Chavez for really bringing that committee to the position it is in right now. And also, of course, to Ms. Peggy Kuo and Ms. Jillian Nunez for being mentors and really shepherding them to the point that they are now. And I think that their ability to, like, I can't imagine myself at their age being asked to go in front of, live camera and answer questions. They didn't have, it was not scripted. They didn't have a script in front of them. I mean, I gave them kind of an idea of, hey, I'd like you to talk about, these topics, your accomplishments. I knew about their traffic study and the water conservation stuff, and they just kind of went with it. I mean, to me, that blew my mind.
Isn't it amazing?
So I can only imagine, the rest of the youth committee would probably do just as well, if not better, especially the more senior members. So, yeah, and of course, if there's any suggestions on topics or other things from council, I'd certainly welcome any ideas. It's something that I think by now maybe you've kind of gotten an idea that I'm trying to do it at least once a month. If there's more things we can cover, perhaps we can increase that. I know staff's done an amazing job at trying to, I guess for lack of a better word, bring up the production value a little bit. But I kind of like the sort of low budget feel to it. You literally just have an iPhone on a tripod. And I remember the first session, a lot of comments were like they couldn't see my face. And I didn't even think that was important. I thought maybe it was the audio message. But we're trying to do better. And I want to thank Jerry for actually reaching out to me. And we'll go over some ideas to how we can improve that aspect of it. So. And having said that, I'd like to just wish everyone a happy and safe 4th of July and reiterate our city manager's caution to not do illegal fireworks. It's just don't do it because we're gonna get you.
Jerry, the last 2 days there's been a fireworks show, and from my upstairs window, it looks like it's coming from just west of Rosemead Boulevard. Is that near you? Yeah. I mean, it's a full-on fireworks show.
Oh boy. Okay, so we'll keep an eye out for that. All right, moving on to item 16, reimbursements for expenses for city officials. We have those listed in the agenda. So moving on to 17, additional public comments. Do we have anyone from the public that'd like to address? Jerry?
Good evening, Mayor Mann and Mayor Pro Tem Nan Fish, and welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you for being our ambassador to
Thank you.
a long ways away.
It's a long ways away.
Yes,
it is.
yes.
Worth it, though.
Right.
It's worth it.
Yes, thank you. I appreciated Councilman Chavez comments tonight about Mike Riffey and Mary Kokeko. Respectfully, I'd like to add one more, and that would be Vic Colbert, former Parks and Recreation Director, retired in 1992. I'm unsure of when he actually started, but he was the nicest guy. He was president of our Kiwanis Club in 1974, I think. But he was a neat guy. I think he and Lorraine, retired to the beach area. But he made some significant contributions to Temple City before he retired. And also, Councilman Sternquist mentioned the triple digits that are coming this weekend. I would encourage those that are listening at home, check on your senior citizen neighbors. Make sure that they're hydrated. Make sure that they, money is kind of tight for some of them and they don't want to turn on the air conditioning, but encourage them that they need to turn it on, especially when it gets to be maybe 103, 104 in Temple City, which it's expected to happen. So just hope everybody stays safe and sane over the 4th of July days, and thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Oh, Jerry, by the way, the gentleman you mentioned, Nick
Vic
Kovic.
Vic Colbert. K-O-V-E-T-T.
K-O-B-E-T-T.
Yeah.
Oh, Victor.
Victor.
Colbert.
Yes.
Okay, Victor. Got it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. He was prior to Kathy Burrows, and then there was one other person in between there that was just a short amount of time, I think. It was.
Dan Chadwick?
Yes.
When I first came on the Parks and Rec Commission, Vic was the director at the time.
I see. Okay, great. Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comments? Seeing none, I will close public comment. And I would like to adjourn tonight's meeting in the memory of Michael Griffey, Mary Kokeko, and Vic Colbert.